Alright, so welcome back to the fish modeling tutorial. In this case, we're going to we're going to create the textures for the fish, but we're going to use Adobe Photoshop instead of GIMP for this section. If you were looking for the GIMP tutorial, in my channel there's a separate video dedicated for GIMP. This one's dedicated to Photoshop. But starting from about the same process, once you open Maya, make sure that your project is set. It's going to be under projects, fish tutorial. So set. Once the project is set, you can actually, everything will be linked and you'll be able to follow and import stuff. Please remember to set the project. If you don't set the project, your source images won't be available and it just makes everything a lot more difficult. So Control O to open. You're gonna open or File, Open Scene. It's gonna give you the most recent ones. I've mentioned before that creating a working folder helps you keep your scenes organized, but that way you expose only the ones that are at a specific checkpoint. So fish model, I'm going to start from scratch here. Save scene, no. Okay, so at this point you're going to get this part. The important thing here is when you go to UV editor, see if this wants to play along. Okay, no, still wants to play. Okay, so sculpting, UV editing. Alright, just make life a little easier. So at this point, your whole fish should be UV'd. If you follow the tutorial, all the parts are there. In this particular case, I left my body upside down. I'm gonna keep it that way. Just yeah, just so I don't have to redo anything, and you guys should be kind of on the same page. Just remember that your body is upside down if you have it this way. If not, you could just flip it by selecting UV shell, select the shell, E to rotate, and then just rotate it around until it's in the right position and move everything else around. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to leave it how it was. I know these are my eyeballs, the outside of the eyeballs, because I used it. Just double check that these two are the outside and not the inside. Yep, all good. So you know the left side, not the right side. Cool. So once you have all this set up, object mode, select all your objects. If you're in face mode or anything, it might give you an error. So in object mode, just select all your components, and then you're going to go to image, UV snapshot. That's going to send the image out. Before you hit anything else, hit browse so you make sure where you're saving it. It should be under your project, under images, and then you can call it fish UV. I've already done it, so save it. Make sure you change the image format from Maya IFF or anything else to PNG. That we get the transparency if you need it. And you can basically leave everything the same. 2048 is the resolution we're working with, and the edge color white is fine. You can make it black, it really doesn't matter, but if you leave it at white, I'm going to follow that way in the tutorial. So once you hit apply and close, that'll send it out to your source images. You can kind of leave Maya open if you need to, and then just open Photoshop. And in Photoshop, you're going to hit open. You're going to find where your source images is, and under images, so back to your Maya project folder, images, fish UV. You're going to open that. You're not going to be able to see anything at first because the images are kind of, the lines are kind of gray. So you're going to create a new layer for the background. Control Shift N. It's a new layer. Call it BG for background. Hit OK. Shift F5 for fill. Oh. Shift F5 to fill. And it's going to ask you what content. You can do different colors. If you did a different, like a white, if you did white lines and you want a black background, if you did a black background, then you want white lines. And leave it at black and hit OK. Still won't see anything because it's in front of it. You're going to move it back. And now you should be able to see your fish textures and your UVs actually. So this top layer is going to be the UVs, and we want to lock this layer because we don't want to mess with that layer. We don't want to paint on it or anything like that. We're going to also lock the background layer so we don't mess with it either. Control Shift N. It's going to give you a new layer. Just leave it like that. We're going to use the reference image we used. So we're going to hit Control O to open. Back to fish tutorials, Maya folder, and then under source images, you should have your fish image. Hit open, and you'll have that. In class, I just basically took the fish into this project and continually duplicated the fish to give the textures. I'm gonna do something a little bit different this time. I'm just gonna pick the parts that I need from here and paste them over there. So first thing, I want to unlock this layer so that I can mess with it. And I'm going to select the white using the magic wand tool. If you right click on here, you might have your quick select tool in Photoshop. Instead of doing that, just right click and hit magic wand tool. Or I guess W is well, W is going to give you a select tool. So whichever one you have set up, it'll give you there. So just select magic wand tool. And to select it, you just click the white area and it'll select everything. And you hit delete, and that should give you a transparent background. Control D to deselect. And next we're going to select certain parts of the fish that we're going to use and bring them over. So I'm going to use the polygonal lasso tool. And the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to use the body. So I'm going to kind of select around the body, trying to not really use most of the fins or anything like that. Just using the body here. It's okay to get some of the fins and all that. It's not a big deal. You're going to resize everything, but just get parts of the fish here with the polygonal tool. Just kind of go around it. And then around the gills. And that should select the fish there. And you're going to hit Control C to copy and Control V to paste. And that's going to paste it on layer 1. Call it fish body. Control Shift N for new layer. We're going to call this fish head. Alright, make sure your second layer is selected. Now we're going to Control D to deselect. You're going to select outside of the gill here. It's okay to use parts of the body. And you're going to select the head. Control C for copy. Control V for paste. V is the select tool, or the move tool is V. That way you can just move it out of the way. You can know what you're working with. So we got the head, we got the body, and we need the different fins now. Control D to deselect. Polygon lasso tool. There's 1,000 different ways to do this process. I'm just giving you one way. If you have any experience with Photoshop, feel free to use your whatever way makes it easier for you. I showed you one method in class. Use whatever works for you. Control V. I copied it in the last one. V to move it around. And I'm just kind of capturing the different parts that I need. It would be the, oops, actually I made a mistake already. Deselect. Oh, Photoshop is nice now. Okay. When you paste, I guess it pastes it on a new layer, but get comfortable or get used to putting on a new layer. This is the dorsal fin. And you don't have to be as accurate with this stuff. It kind of goes around the content. Control copy, Control paste, V to move. Okay, and that's going to be the tail fin. Now I need the 2. Control C to copy, Control V. V by itself to select the move tool, or you can just select it up here. And like most things at first, it's kind of repetitive. You're just kind of doing the same action over and over to get all the pieces you need. Control copy, Control V, V for the move tool. This is bottom fin 1, bottom fin 2. Let's put those together so we kind of remember where they go. This is the top of the fish, this is the front of the fish, this is the back of the fish. I'm just moving it around so I remember where stuff goes. And so we got those fins. Control D to deselect. The last thing we're going to need is this fin here. It is part of the body, but just from testing it, it looks fine. For this one, we're going to kind of be a little bit more careful with it, just so we don't take the extra parts that we don't need. And just get a generic shape that works for you. Control copy, Control V, V. We're going to move it around there. And then we're going to, I think those are all the parts, yeah. Yeah, we still need the eyeball, but we're gonna look for that online in a minute. I'm gonna link the location online for the eyeball. But cool, those are all the parts. So let's call this the side fin. Okay. So I don't remember. Let's put that up. Or don't forget I put that up. All right, for the fish body, we're gonna select the layer, and I want to fix this issue. Let me turn off the UVs for now, just so I can work well. The scroll around is Alt, and the scroll bar lets you zoom in. Control and the scroll bar is left and right, and then scroll bar by itself it's up and down. So if you see me move around, that's how I'm doing it. You can also select the move tool, hand tool, which is H, and that'll let you kind of pan around like a touchscreen. Okay, we're going to use the clone stamp tool, and what the clone stamp tool is going to do is going to clone parts of here to here. And what you want to do is you want to use oh god, what am I doing? You want to use part of the fish that's similar, so you don't want to clone parts up here because it's green. You want to clone somewhere over here that's similar to what's going to cover. So with the clone stamp tool, you're going to hit Alt. You're going to get this little crossbar section, crosshair, sorry. And you're going to kind of point in where you want to start copying from. So just click, and then from there you can start painting. You can see it just kind of makes it disappear. It's pretty good. You might have to resample a different location. Every time you let go of the drawing, it'll resample from that point on. And as you see, it's gone. The side fin's gone, so we don't need that there anymore. Cool. Turn on the UVs again, and I'm gonna move the easier parts first. So V for move tool. I'm gonna click the face and kind of move it to the face. The tail, move it to the tail. This one I already put here. It's the side fin. Dorsal fin, it's gonna go there. This bottom fin's gonna go there. Other bottom fin is here. Fish body stays there. Okay, so Control T is free transform, and these parts are gonna come up. Control T, and you just scale it. If you have a newer version of Photoshop, it'll scale like equally in all directions once you pick the corners. If you have an older version of Photoshop, it'll do kind of like this. It'll rescale stuff. In order to do it the right way, if you have the older version, just hit Shift as you drag the corners. It'll, in your case, if you have an older Photoshop, it'll scale uniformly. If you have the new version of Photoshop, the latest, and you hold Shift, it'll scale things freely. So just be careful. Know what version you have. If you have the 2019 or the latest version, then you can just grab the corner and scale. If you have the older version, hold Shift. Simple as that. You want everything things to stay uniformly. That's why I mention it. And you're kind of just resizing things to fit the fish UV. You tilt it a little bit to make sure you cover all the UVs. Just to make sure you're covering well, you might want to change the opacity down to like 50%. That way you can see the lines. And you basically want to make sure that there's no black points or parts of the fish that aren't being used. So scale things a little bit bigger if you need to. And to me, that's inside mostly. Yeah, that looks really good to me there. Hit enter to place it and just make sure that the outside parts are all good to go. Looks good to me. Alright, put that opacity back up to 100. And I'm going to duplicate that so I can use the other side of the body. And to do that, I'm going to hit Control J. You see fish body copy, call it fish body 2, or leave copy. It's really not a big deal. Hit V for the move tool, and just it's going to move one. In this case, fish body 2. Hit Control T for free transform. Right click, flip vertically, and that's going to put it on its belly, which is what we need. And we're going to scroll down to make sure we're in a good place. We're going to hit the opacity here, and we're just going to fit it so that most of the fish is covered. That looks pretty good to me. Cool. Opacity to 100%. Now you notice that the fish is going into parts of the other models. What you want to do is you want to erase those parts. So hit E for erase tool. And then it's going to be up here. The eraser tool is right there. E. And just erase the parts that are over other UVs without messing with the UVs of the fish body. And again, you can turn down the opacity to make sure that everything's clear. Everything's clear. Cool. So that's good to go. F is for full screen. All right. For the fish head, Control T, select this layer, then hit Control T, and then scale it up till it takes up more of the fish here. Rotate it a little bit to make it fit better. And I kind of mentioned this in class, but remember that I'm going to scale it down a bit actually, so I can use some of the gills. Yeah, we're going to use some of this here. I want to scale it down a little bit to fit. Hit enter. And then we're going to use the clone tool again to get rid of the eyeball. The eyeball doesn't really fit well in where it is now, and it's just not a great part of the fish right here. So I'm going to sample some of the stuff here and use the brackets to scale your brush size. I'm just going to borrow from these sides here. I'm going to resample this here to kind of cover these parts. There you go. I just got rid of some of the repetitive patterns there. I'm going to do the same thing with the mouth area. I don't love how that part looks, so I'm going to sample this here and just resample it a few times. That'll do it. So there you go. We got rid of the eyeball. I'm going to hit Control J on that fish head layer to get a copy. Fish head 2. And then Control T, transform. We're going to move it away. Right click, flip horizontally, and that's going to give us the fish to look the other direction. Oops. Alt to zoom in. Just going to rotate a bit here. Okay, looks good. Okay. There. So I'm just making sure all the sides are inside. There's no black from the background in here. That looks good, but I am kind of over going into the UVs on this side, I can tell. So hit enter to place it, E to erase. Just erase around it. Just make sure you don't go into the UVs. Cool. Looks good to me. We're now going to scale all the fins. So Control T on the dorsal fin. So Control T on the dorsal fin. I'll zoom in a little bit to work on it. And then just scale it. Scale it a little bit more to cover all the ends. Looks good. We're going to do the side fin, actually. Yeah, Control T to scale it. And a lot of these processes are very repetitive. Once you do it once, you just keep going. Control J to copy that, move it up. Okay, looks good. V for the move tool. Select the back fin here, Control T to scale it. Scale. Move it around. This one seems to, I don't want to lose too much resolution, so I don't want to make it too big. So I'm going to place it there. You might find that it works fine for yours, but I'm just going to copy some of that texture around here. Same this one here, and just move it up here a little bit, just to get more of that texture and less of that part of the fish. And just to play it safe down here, let me add some more texture. Ready. Looks good to me. It's not going into anybody else, so it's all good. So I'm done up there. V for the move tool. Select the bottom fin. Control T to scale. And just scale it so it fits your fish. Scale. And doesn't go into the next one. You can move it around a little bit if possible. I'm going to hit E for the eraser tool and just erase it around it so I don't go into. V for the move tool. Select this back fin. Control T. You're going to scale it up and move it in place. And again, the idea is to use parts of the fish so that it looks somewhat realistic. There we go. Pretty happy with that. And I'm going to hit enter. It's all in. And I want to erase some of that up here because it's going into the other UV up there. Okay, it's good on the bottom though. Alrighty, so that guy's done. So left is the eyes and the mouth. The eyes, I didn't like the eyes that come with that fish, so I'm going to just go online and look for fish eye. Maybe, yeah, that's good. I kind of like this picture here, it's pretty good. I'm going to click it. Maybe not that one. This is pretty good here. Yeah. I'm going to right click it, copy image, go back to Photoshop, and then Shift N, Control Shift N to create a new layer, and I'm going to paste it on that layer. You're going to get this tiny little fish. It's okay. V to move it, and we're going to move it by the eyeball here, and zoom in so you can work. Alrighty. I'm going to turn off the UVs for 1 sec so I can work on something here. Select the elliptical marquee tool. If you have a square or anything else, just right click on it and select the elliptical marquee tool. And holding shift to kind of get a round shape. You're going to try to, and spacebar to move it around. you're gonna catch most of the eye that you can, and you're gonna once you have selected a good shape of the eye, you're gonna go Control Shift I, and that's gonna select the inverse of the eyeball, and hit delete, and that's gonna leave you just the eyeball. Control deselect with Control D, and then V to move it around. We're happy with that. Like I mentioned, the left side here is the eye. Oh, there's parts left. E to erase. Okay, V. If you leave any parts outside of the canvas, it won't delete it. It's okay. Control T to scale it. We're going to scale it up. It's not a great resolution, but it works for us for now. So that we know that we checked before we left Maya that the left side was the outside of the eyeballs, and then so we're going to copy that. Let's call it fish eye 1. So we're going to Control J to copy it. Fish eye 2. I'm going to move that guy down here. It's looking good. And we're going to copy one more time. Fish eye back 1. And we're going to move that guy way to the other side. And you're going to say, well, why are we using parts of the eye for that? We're actually going to get rid of the iris part. I'm turn off the UV so you can see. You can turn off layers by hitting the eyeball icon. It'll hide them. I'm going to use that clone tool that we used before with a smaller brush. I'm using the brackets in the keyboard to make it bigger or smaller. And I just want that color. I really like how that color looks for the eyeball instead of using like a wide eye like a human would. So I'm going to sample this area here and just kind of paint around and constantly resample so that I don't take parts that I already used. And this isn't super important, it's just kind of a creative choice I made. But the idea is that you'll have that nice texture in case you animate the eyes and give it some rotation stuff. You'll have some pretty good backs of eyes. Turn on the UVs again, and I'm going to copy that and call this back 2. Enter. V to move, and scroll it down. And I'm happy there. So the last part that I have left is the mouth. And depending on your fish, you might see more or less of your mouth, but if you're using a like a drawing tablet, I have a drawing monitor, so it's easier to work with that stuff. If you don't have one of those, using the mouse is just fine. I'm going to use the mouse for this example. We're going to create a new layer, call it mouth base color, and hit B for brush. You can also select the brush tool right here. And we're going to change the color. We want like a dark red to give it a base. And we're just going to draw around. Make sure your brush is on a soft round brush. Don't use the hard brush. The hard brush works for some things, but sometimes it's a little bit too hard. And we're going to try to blend some of this color here. So the hard brush won't really work that well. So just use a soft brush. For the base layer, it's fine. But for the next layer that we're going to do, it's not fine. Once you have that base color, that's going to be like the kind of like a medium color. I want to do a darker color for like the throat area. So I know that the fish breaks in half here. This section, this is the top of the mouth and this is the bottom of the mouth. So around here is the throat. Brush tool. I want to just kind of brush it in. And I also don't want the lips to be super bright. So I'm going to kind of like press a bunch of times the drawing or the left mouse click just to give it some spots. And then we're going to go back into color and give it a little bit brighter color than all the ones we've used and give it some like bright spots around. And now what I'm going to do is use this blur tool. It's the smudge tool, not the blur tool. Once you have the blur tool, you can kind of move the colors around and blend them together. So you click down and you just kind of move stuff around. If you want more dark colors in, you kind of move them as you need. And I'm just kind of mixing them together so that it's not as obvious what color it is. I'm just doing little spirals and whatnot to really blend the colors in. Bring some of the brighters in, some of the darker. Alright. And once you're kind of happy with your color, it's fine. You just have to give it a little bit of interest so it's not super boring. And with that, you should be done. So once all your parts of your fish are in the right location and colored in, last thing you have to do is just turn off your UVs. This will get rid of the lines. That way you don't see your lines in the fish in the final color. Save your project. You should have saved this a while ago, but save it. Hit Control S. It should be on your same fish project, but instead of images, take it to Source Images. Create a new folder, call it Fish Textures or Textures in general, and then Fish Textures, and then you want to save your project right there. Fish Textures 2. And that's going to be your actual project folder where you're working stuff off of stuff. The next thing you want to do is you want to group these things together. So select the highest layer that's not UV and your lowest layer that's not background. Shift select, and that's going to select all your layers, and hit Control G to group them and call it Fish Diffuse. So this is your color map. This is what's going to give your model color. You're also going to have to do a bump map, and we might have to do some other maps depending. Is this going to? No. Okay. So it looks pretty good to me. I don't see many things going into each other, so I'm going to turn that off again. And then hit Control Shift S to save as. And instead of saving it as a Photoshop file, I'm going to save it as a PNG. And save it as Fish Diffuse. I'm calling it 2 because I already have a version. Hit OK. OK. And then on the highest layer here, under Fish Diffuse, you're going to add a hue saturation layer. So you're going to hit this little yin-yang looking sign and go to hue and saturation. And what it's going to do is going to put a layer over everything. And when you desaturate it, it's going to take away all the color. And we want that for our bump map. With this picture, it's almost impossible to get like an accurate bump map, but we're going to give it a little bit of texture, a little bit of a pop. So once you desaturate everything, make it black and white, you can add a levels map if you want. And you'll be able to kind of move the levels around, make things either brighter or darker. Basically, the darker things are, the deeper it goes into the fish. The brighter it is, the more it comes out of the fish, and then gray somewhere in between. So I'll make mine a little darker, see what happens. See how I like that. Well, a little brighter instead of darker. Let's do that. Alright. So File, Save As, Control Shift S, and again, instead of that, you're going to save it as a PNG. And you're going to call it Fish BMP or Bump. My case 2. Save. Alright. Once it's done saving, you're going to go back to Maya. And in Maya, you're going to, if you're in a different workspace, go to Classic Workspace. And then select all the components again. I mentioned it in class, but just a reminder, don't change Blinn 1. So when you go to the attribute editor, hit Control A to get there. You'll see all your history on here. You can delete your history if you want. So edit, delete all by type, history. It'll clear all the history you did. If you go to Lambert 1, that's the Maya's standard shader. Don't mess with that. Don't change the color on it because everything you build will now have that new color or texture you put on it. So don't mess with Lambert 1. What you want to do is once you select everything, you're going to right click, assign favorite material. We're going to use a blend in class. You're going to see blend 1 now. Call it fish material. And then under the color section here, you're going to hit this checkerboard pattern. It's to create a node. Hit file, and then it's going to take you to this page here. Image name, hit the search, and it should take you right to source images. Go to textures, and fish diffuse. Open. You might not see your fish change or anything change in your viewfinder or in your viewer. Hit 6, and then you'll see it. Whoa. And you see your color there. So your fish looks okay for now. You can see the mouth, it's red and it's kind of different, so it's pretty good. There's some weird stuff going on. To get out of it, these nodes here take you in and out of the nodes that you create. So triangle into the square is into the node. Triangle outside of the square is out of the node. So we're going to go out. There's no transparency node, I think, created. No, it's just weird in general. Might be my model, but yours should look better if you follow along. But the other thing is, it kind of looks kind of funky, so we're going to give it the that bump map. Once you get out to the main area, the main shader of the material, you're going to go to where it says bump mapping, and then you're going to hit this option bar here, or the checkerboard. Again, choose a file, and you're going to go into bump value. You're going to go in there, and you're going to input your fish bump that you made. Open, and your fish is going to look terrible. You're going to go back, and you're going to kind of tweak these around until your fish looks a lot better. I'm just going to give it a little bit of depth, not too much, just so that the light rolls off a little bit different. Still too much. I'm going to do 0.60. Alright. So that's good for me. You get a little bit of texture, the light rolls off a little bit different, and makes your fish look slightly better. And with that set, your fish is textured. Just save your project, and you should be good to go.